Hi, I'm Lisa Laronde, the first woman president at RSJ International and the host of this new podcast called the Powerhouse Project. On the podcast today, we have journeyman, ironworker, boilermaker, and welder, Jamie McMillan. Welcome, Jamie. How are you?
Great. Thank you so much for having me. This is very exciting.
Oh, I'm very excited to have you. I have to ask you one question. Is it journeyman or is it journey person? Or are they going to change that?
They keep talking about changing it. And when you actually sit at roundtables, they call it journey person. I like the word journey because I see it as a status, not a gender. And in my opinion, I didn't go to school for a bachelorette degree. So I like journeyman.
That's awesome. So what did you like about being an ironworker? Now, are you still active?
I haven't been on the tools since just before the pandemic, and I had to make a choice at a point where I was getting asked to go out and speak so much that I wasn't getting an opportunity to be on the tools at all. I miss it every single day. I get jealous of everyone I see working in construction, right from flaggers to people up on the steel when I drive by job sites. But I think it's very important to recruit the next generation of skilled trade workers, and we need voices out there that are actively doing it. So that's what I concentrate on now.
Yeah, and I think we have that in common. I know I speak a lot for women in skilled trades, women in leadership, and I really believe that we have to educate and get out there and talk about it. I feel like we're starting to attract women into the industry, particularly into apprenticeship programs. How do you think we're doing retaining them?
Yeah, attracting them into the skilled trades is not a problem at all. I find recruitment so easy, but the retention is a whole different issue. And I keep saying we need the numbers of people retiring from the industry rather than the people going into the industry, because it's great to say, hey, look, we have all these numbers of people going in, but people aren't staying. And there's multiple reasons for that. And one of the reasons is that at this point, it's still a very toxic work culture that needs to be worked on, and accountability needs to happen, but it's not quite there yet.
So do you think that women are prepared to actually work on a crew, like to understand what's going to happen or what behavior still is existing in 2024?
I don't think that every woman is set up for success when they step into the skilled trades. I think that they need realistic job previews before they get into the trades. There's a lot of women in trade specific programming and pre-apprenticeships or whatever that they can go through, but I think it's really important to integrate them with the men, because what I've seen is a lot of women that go through these women-only programs get on the job site and they don't have that same banter and camaraderie that they had with the women, and they're not prepared on how to pick and choose their battles when they get in the skilled trades, and it often leads to them ultimately leaving the industry.
Now, I know when we met, you and I were chatting, and your conversation that we had actually stuck with me, and I repeated a lot, and we were talking about, how we need to speak up for one another, and we need to let people know that there's harassment and discrimination within the crews. And you had said to me, but if you're getting called from the union hall and you're a woman and you're speaking up against your crew, you get put to the bottom of the list and you don't get called out. And I was actually at a conference with one of the big unions, and he said, that does not exist. That is not true.
Well, I would like to see him go down to the Women Build Nations conference and speak to the 6,000 women who will be there next year in New Orleans, and see if he comes back with that same opinion. That is not true.
I know. So what do you think the solution is to that? Like, how, I know that with Tarba, they now have a female or a woman executive director. So I think that that's a step in the right direction. But how do we start to change that? Or what can we do, even you and I, or anybody, what can we do to start to change that?
I think there's a lot of ways to approach this. One of the things that I think that's very important is that if we're trying to promote an inclusive work culture, we have to be inclusive with our efforts, because I'm not about exclusive efforts. I'm about inclusive efforts. And that means bringing the men to the table. And we need our male allies to step up and help us change the work culture. Because again, this isn't just about construction. This is in every single workplace. There is toxicity. People treat people disrespectfully all the time. We deal with it in our own families, our friendship systems, our school. We are raised around this. And in order to change the culture, I think a lot of things need to change, all the way from early childhood education, maybe bringing back empathy training in early childhood education, making kids understand accountability, and then moving forward and making sure that those same things are happening in the workplace. Because when we do report stuff, especially as unionized workers, it goes to a job steward. We don't have an HR department, and the job steward will often deal with it. And a lot of times what happens is the woman or the underrepresented person will lose their position, over the maybe studies that work for that company, because it's easier just to get rid of the squeaky wheel than to keep them and, hold the others accountable for it.
No, for sure. And I actually was talking to this young Indigenous worker, and what happened was she was on a cruise, she's a carpenter, and the foreperson kept putting his arm around her. So again, not in a sexual manner, but he was in his mid-40s, she's in her 20s, and he kept putting his arm around her. So she actually said to him, please don't do that. It makes me feel uncomfortable. And it's like, oh, we're just joking. So it got escalated. He was the supervisor, got escalated to the foreperson. And they actually had a conversation. And the foreperson actually said, and he was a man, don't worry, he's just joking. You got to be able to handle it. And then it continues to go on. And he actually said to her, if you actually put a complaint in, it's going to go to HR, and then there's going to be an investigation, and then everyone's going to know what's going on. So this goes on for a period of time. And anyway, she ends up emailing him and says, I want this to go to HR now because it has to stop. I'm feeling uncomfortable. I've told him to stop. It just keeps going on. And now it's actually getting a little worse. So they do the fucking investigation, and now they interview everybody. And then it comes up that he didn't mean anything by it. So they weren't going to do anything about it. And this is in 2023. Now, this poor girl ended up obviously resigning because she was like, I don't want to work in this environment. And nobody's doing anything to provide a safe place for me to work. I don't have a way to be able to, lodge a complaint. And she didn't want to get him fired. That's not what she wanted. She just wanted the behavior to stop. And it's interesting to me that we're still dealing with that. Part of what I say is we need representation. And if you have, women or underrepresented groups in superintendents and people and supervisors and project directors, I think that that's going to change at least the conversation that we have. I know in my workplace when we had a similar situation, and it was a manager with one of his subordinates, and we did the investigation, and we came back with, it was a he said, she said, we couldn't make a decision. And I remember my daughter saying to me, Mom, you did make a decision. I was like, no, we didn't. She goes, yes, you did. By not making a decision, you sided with the guy. You said that this behavior did not happen. And I was like, holy shit, that's not what I wanted to do. So I pulled the girl in. I said, I apologize on behalf of myself and as well as the company. And what are we going to do to change that so that we don't do that as an organization again? Now it was just having a conversation with the supervisor saying, first of all, you're a manager, so you have to understand, even that if that's not the intent of your behavior or your words, this is how it's being taken. So you need to recognize that. But it was really all about having a conversation. And he still works for us. So I think that by not firing somebody or by making this big deal, this was about now educating. This is how your behavior's been taken. These are how your words are being taken. You just need to be careful of how you talk. Do you think we'll ever get to a point that that's going to happen in work crews?
It's a touchy subject because I remember a long time ago, I had to go and do a speaking engagement, and they asked me to talk about conscious and unconscious bias. And then looking at the behavior that's coming from men on job sites. And I really had to think about it a lot before I did the presentation because I work with a lot of older retired men that come back to work sometimes to work with us. And a lot of times I would be put with them and they call you hun and sweetie and they want to do the work for you. But it's not because they're being sexually inappropriate. To them, you're like a daughter, a sister, or they're thinking of their wives. They're just wanting to protect you, and that's unconscious bias. And for some women, they don't know how to handle that, and they don't know how to recognize that, where I do because I have a father like that. And so it's easy for me, and I recognize that. But teaching people how to understand when the behavior is, literally being biased or unbiased is very important. And having healthy boundaries, we all need to have boundaries, and people that are working alongside us need to understand what we feel comfortable with. So if she told him she felt uncomfortable with that, he should have respected that boundary, but it seems like he didn't. And I don't know if that's a cultural thing or whatever for him, but I understand her wanting to escalate that. And at the same time, she's making a stand for the rest of the women that will come in or underrepresented groups that come in behind her. But it's a really difficult situation to deal with because, for example, when I'm on a job site and I've been there for a long time, I get comfortable with the guys and my boundary line starts to move, right?
Yeah.
And then a new person comes in and they have a very different boundary. And now the guys are walking on eggshells. One person says something inappropriately and it throws everything out. So I think that life skills, healthy boundaries, and teaching people how to pick and choose their battles is very important. And we need training for that. But all the training in the world will never do a thing if we don't hold people accountable and have serious repercussions for that type of behavior when it's not being respected.
And I absolutely agree with you. I say in the construction industry that we have one of the higher suicide rates. And so I think that, again, this was this male-dominated industry that you were always taught to just suck it up. Whatever happens, you don't need to complain about it. And although we talk a lot about women, the men are being mistreated, and maybe it's much more of a physical, or again, we have a lot of racism, I know, in some of our construction sites. So it's not only underrepresented groups. I think training's a great idea. Have everybody onboarded and just, how your words are being taken. I know in my organization, when we started with our DEI training, we put everybody through Equity 101 training, and it was eye-opening. And when our 4 people went through, we heard the most amount of comments coming back saying, you know what, I had no idea. I had no idea that, my jokes were inappropriate. And I guess what happens to people is, they don't want to ruin their fun. And I know we struggled with this a little bit as we started to as I get a little bit more educated and I understand, how inappropriate things are. And again, I've only been in the construction industry for 9 years, but even in the beginning, just the behaviors that were tolerated 9 years ago are not being tolerated anymore. And I agree with you that people are going, oh, we have to walk on eggshells. But I go, at the end of the day, really, it's all common sense. It's just, how do you want to be treated? And let's just make sure that we just treat each other equally. At this conference that I was at, they actually said, in Ontario, there has not been one human rights complaint for women in construction about harassment or discrimination. Can you believe that?
It's interesting. I was on a stakeholders committee years ago, and I remember one of the women from their HR department at a company told us on the stakeholders committee that they had no issues with sexual harassment or any kind of bullying, anything on the work site. And I was like, okay, so how do you know this from the office? I said, because I worked at your work site, and I can tell you that a lot of stuff happened on the shop floors that never got to you because we have a steward in contract construction that we have to go to. They shut it down. They deal with it. It never goes to HR because we're contract workers. It's not going to go to the HR department of the factory that we're working at. So they're not going to hear about it. And I'm like, until you actually go on the shop floor and disguise yourself as a worker and put on some coveralls and get dirty and go work with the guys, then you don't come here and sit in front of a panel of people and try to say that you don't have that in your workplace, because there's very few workplaces that don't have it. And I've seen guys treat other guys just as bad, if not worse. So it's everywhere. And people who say it's not there, then they're not telling the truth.
No, and I agree. And I think either you're just not admitting to it. And I think we need to take the stigma away. And we're only going to do that by talking about it and figuring out, how we're going to fix it, and whether that's training or education, representation, however that's going to work. I think the more we talk about it, the easier it's going to get. And I think that we're going to be able to find solutions. Do you find like the industry's getting better since you started? And when did you start?
21 years ago.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah. I see some changes. I see more women showing interest. I see more underrepresented groups as well. I see them getting more support from government, but I still don't see the retention the same. And there's multiple issues for that. And I think a lot of times it goes back to just people being humans. People who can be jerks at times. And I think it goes back, but we also have a lot of antagonistic personality styles in this industry. There's a lot of emotional dysregulation. When you understand all the psychology behind it, I mean, you look back at the trades when women took over for the men because the men were gone to war. But when the men came back, they got back into the trades and the women went back home. But those men were damaged with PTSD and all types of trauma that they seen from the wars. And then they got their kids in. And the kids weren't raised with that really good mirror to reflect back on to build that emotional stability, right? So it's a big cultural shift that we have to go through to bring back humanity to a better place, not just the trades. This is everywhere. This is a problem we have with humanity.
No, definitely. I agree. So how did you get into all the public speaking, and your business is Kick-Ass?
I have Kick-Ass Careers and Made in the Trade. Made in the Trade is my professional speaking voice, and Kick-Ass Careers is represented by 14 ambassadors. And we are all we're in the industry, we're authentic, and we are very much about going out and promoting the skilled trades as viable pathways to youth. I was a late bloomer on the internet. Like, seriously, I was in my 30s where I even opened up a computer and got an email address. And I have no idea what Skills Ontario reached out to me and said, will you be a mentor at an event? And I never realized that being a mentor there would eventually lead to me being called up as a panelist because somebody didn't show up, and then me getting asked to speak. And before you know it, I was being asked to speak everywhere, and it just hasn't stopped. So I think I found my voice here.
That's awesome. I heard you speak in Portland. I just thought you were amazing and very, very inspirational. I think it's really awesome that you're actually going into the schools, because I think that that's the important place that we're missing an opportunity. I was speaking at a Girl Guides event, and I was talking to these two young girls, and one had taken auto shop and the other one had taken, I think it was called building or something. And they were the only girls that were in their classes. They were talking, the one girl, she was the top of her class, and she was just motivated to beat this guy. And she goes, he was just so pissed off at the end because, she got the award. And it was just interesting. And I really like to hear those conversations. So do you get into the schools often?
Oh, yes. I actually had to stop working on the tools because I couldn't keep up with the school schedule. I kept asking to take time off, and they were like, every time you take a day off, not only are you setting us behind, you're taking food out of another person's mouth. So I had to make the choice. And last year, I think it was 32 weeks of school presentations, between 11 and 15 presentations a week all across Ontario. I spent a lot of time on the road traveling with itineraries from like rural communities to, it's amazing. It's a hard existence because I miss home a lot. It's hard to nail down good friendships and relationships because I'm never around for anything, but it's so rewarding.
So what's one of your favorite stories from visiting maybe a rural school?
Oh, I have so many. I wouldn't even know where to start, but I'm going to go back. It wasn't a rural community, but this is a really good story that's resonated with me for many years. I used to be the keynote speaker for the skills competition every year. It's the Young Women's Conference. So they have it at their big national conference, and it's pretty big. The Skills Ontario one, I think, is the hugest one in Canada. And before the conference, I was welcomed to join this table at a mentorship skills, smaller little event. And there was this awesome little girl sitting next to me. Her name was Bella. I had no idea that she had any different abilities than anybody else. She just was so cute. But she kept talking to me about how she really wanted to be in the trades, and she wanted to do robotics and woodworking. She wanted to do everything. But then she mentioned to me that she was worried about it because she did have these different abilities and she struggled with things. And I said, hey, never let that stop you. There's a lot of people that have different abilities in the skilled trades. And, I never thought about that girl again because I meet so many girls. Well, I got a phone call. I was down at Women Build Nations in California at the time. And I got this phone call from one of the people from Skills Ontario. And they said to me, there was a young girl, Bella, that called in because she found out you're going to be our keynote speaker. And she wants to know if she can introduce you to the stage because she said that you had such an impact on her life.
Wow.
So what I did is this Women Build Nations, this woman, Marie Fletcher, gave me a white hat, and women I was telling the story. We had a workshop. We told it. People filled up this white hat with stickers. We got a book for her. We filled it with all these kind of notes of inspiration and encouraging her. And she got up on the stage. And what I didn't know, because I was sitting next to her at the mentorship dinner, is that she has a disability where she loses her balance all the time and she kept falling over. And this girl who got up in front of all these kids, there must have been about 1,200 of her peers in the audience, had the courage to get up and stumble through the words and introduce me to the stage and say that I made such an impact in her life. And it was so amazing to see. She made me cry. And then I got up and I got to make her cry by giving her this whole package from all these women at Women Build Nations. And that's just a story that resonates with me all the time. And I don't know where she is now, but she ended up calling me later on because she herself facilitated a skilled trades day at her school.
Oh, that's awesome. I think that's really cool. And those are the stories I think that we want to hear. So, if you can just touch one person and have them introduced into the skilled trades and like it, and then they're going to tell somebody else about their journey. But I'm interested to know, like, when you started, you would probably be the only woman, I would imagine.
I was the only woman on a job site once with 400 men, but usually for one reason or another, there was always another woman, whether they were another trade. And I've always tried to find a way to talk to them. And I don't want to be that girl because sometimes girls can be so catty with each other on the job site. I'm like, but why? But the men do a good job of pitting women against each other too. So I've always tried to make a point of introducing myself to the girls and being like, yo, I'm here if you need me.
Now, do you think that this changed, or do you think there's more women on the job sites now than there was when you started?
It's funny because I think we know about each other more now because of social media. I think that if it wasn't social media, we wouldn't be as connected. And I think there would still be women that would think that they were the only woman out there that was on the job site. Because until I went to Women's Nations, hundreds of women had never, ever seen another woman on a job site and thought they were the only one. I am seeing more girls, but like I said, the number for retention isn't going up. It's still hovering around the 4%. And if it goes above that, it's usually pretty inflated in skilled trade.
What can we do to change that? Is there anything that's going to move that dial? I know that like out west, they have better stats than we do in Ontario. I'm not really sure why that is. Do you think it's preparing girls or women, maybe getting government involvement or doing industry training? What do you think would be helpful?
I just transferred out to the Vancouver Ironworkers. I'm part of Local 97 Ironworkers. And I have to say that when you have a business manager who really supports and promotes women and brings women into the training centers and includes them on the trustees or the e-boards, and my business manager even has Danielle, who works at the hall as a business agent, I think it's really amazing. I also think the mountains and the salty seawater and the surfing and the beautiful glacier lakes might have something to do with it.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, it just seems like people are laid back more there. And when I worked out west, I worked out in camp jobs out there, and there was a significant amount of women. But you know what? We had this camaraderie because I think it was Wednesday or Thursday night, all the women would get together and we would go out and have dinner together and banter. And I met so many friends from across the country that way. And it's cool because now when I travel to different schools, if I get invited to BC, I'll actually invite some of those women out at times, or I'll go meet up with them and include them in my presentations. So, yeah.
Now, with the Ontario Skilled Trades, because you do a lot of work with them, right? Are you just getting involved now with the lobbying efforts or the efforts with the government? Or has that always been part of what you did?
It's always been part of it. It's been up and down throughout the years. I just take the opportunities that come my way and I try to give a very direct voice. I try to be as honest and vulnerable as possible. And what happened is I think that in the past couple of years, like coming out of COVID, I think is when I had to do a lot of work on myself. And I think that I used to take things very personally. I have really bad ADHD. I have a high level of rejection sensitivity dysphoria. And I think that because I took things so personally for so long, I really did have a lot of work to do on myself. And now that I've done a lot of hard work on myself, I think that more opportunities are coming my way because once you change your own behavior, change the people that you surround yourself with, things change. And it's just about surrounding yourself with positive, forward-thinking people.
I 100% agree with you. And I feel like it's starting to change, but I do feel like women aren't always supportive of each other. And what I'm trying to do to change that narrative is let's celebrate women. I've been very, very fortunate and to be recognized for the work that I've been doing. And really what I want to do is be able to share that with other women. Now it's interesting, when I got into my senior leadership role, I looked for associations that I could network with other women so that I could find my community. I was looking for women that were in leadership and construction, and I couldn't find anybody. The only one I found at the time was Jenny Coco, who was the owner of Coco Paving, who's now has legal issues. But it's interesting now that I've connected with all of these women, even like yourself, that I had no idea existed. So now I'm trying to make a really big effort to say we are all out here and we've all struggled to some degree. Maybe we don't have the same journey, but we've all struggled to some degree similar. And it's not only a provincial issue. I think it's a national issue. I think we can even say it's a global issue. So let's start getting together and having conversations so that, one, we don't feel alone or feel like it's, our fault for something that we're doing, that it really is just the way particularly our industry has been. And now we can be part of that change. We can be part of that movement. I'm really excited to be able to do that.
I have to give you a big, big shout out for that because honestly, I'm not going to lie, I was involved a little bit with KWIC back in the day, but I felt like there was such a separation between women in trades and women in construction back then. And a group of us women in trades, it felt like we just didn't belong in that space. It didn't feel like an environment that we were comfortable in. And we're not always the dressy type. We're kind of rough around the edges and stuff, but it's so funny because the last time I went to the event and became a member and got involved more with NAWIC, I'm like, wow, it's really changing. And I think women are really starting to support each other now. And it's not this distance between women on the tools anymore and women in construction, because there is a difference. And I think we're all starting to realize that we need to work together to be that change that we want to see in the industry.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I also, talk to women and say, maybe you start on the tools. I cite you a lot. I think you've done an amazing job and I'm very, very supportive of your journey. But I go, this is where she started and look what she's doing now. So even if this isn't your lifelong career, it actually gets you in, it gets you a pension, you have benefits, you can meet some pretty cool people, you'll learn some skills, and then, either you can advance up into supervisory roles or maybe it takes you somewhere else. So I think we just need to continue to talk and celebrate one another's. So what are your next goals? Like, what do you want to accomplish next?
Oh, I want to change the world and make everybody realize skilled trades are such a valuable career. And honestly, so many people are afraid of AI right now because it is taking over the world, and they're predicting that it's going to take about 20 million jobs away in the near future. But the greatest thing about skilled trades is that as long as infrastructure is around on this planet and humans are on it, we need people to build and maintain that infrastructure. And that means every level, from the boots on the ground, people doing the tools, all the way up to the planners, the engineers, the inspectors, the health and safety reps. It means everybody. And it's such an amazing career. It took me years to grasp the concept of how big this is. We all depend on this every single day.
I think that's awesome. So I wanted to end this episode with, what piece of advice would you give your younger self?
Oh my. I would say I didn't know about skilled trades being a viable option when I was in high school, but if I can go back and give myself any advice, it would have been to follow more along the skilled trades pathway. And despite the fact that my parents were not interested in having me be in a male-dominated career, because I did talk to my dad about mining, I think I would have just told myself, you can do this, put your heart into it. And right now, I would probably be Zooming with you from my yacht in Costa Rica with the pina colada. Made more money at a younger age.
Never say never. You still may be doing that. Oh, Jamie, it's been a pleasure having you. And I hope that our listeners connect and follow you online. You've done amazing, amazing things for our industry. I hope that you keep it up, and I will continue to follow you. You inspire me every single day. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. And I can't wait until we do some great stuff together, because I know we will.
Find more information about our company, our guests, and more at thepowerhouse-project.com, and subscribe wherever you get your podcast.